What many are calling the most significant NBA game of the last 100 years took place this weekend in Atlanta at State Farm Arena, where the Knicks took down the Hawks 99-90. First time we've played each other since the postseason, when Trae Young threw us on the grill, barbecued us, flipped us over, barbecued the other side, got those nice grill marks on it, and then sent us out to get eaten up. Kemba Walker and Derrick Rose did not play, and the Hawks suffered a couple injuries during the game. Bogey, the big one. Where do you take stock of the Hawks at this point in the season? Where do you take stock of both of our teams at this point in the season?
Yeah, this is the point of the season, and I will just say I did want to win that. I don't care. Like, I know you made a joke at the top of it, but it's just like, I think a rivalry developed last year.
I think so, too.
And so I love it, and I want to lean into the rivalry, so I know we lost it, and I am mad about that. Yes, we had injuries. Yes, you guys were missing players, so we just going to take the L. I wanted to win it. But to that point, this is the point in the season where you got to make something shake. Like, whether if you're not winning or you're not performing to the level that you want to perform at, there's going to be some shakeups happening. And so for our team, like, you asked me about it a couple weeks ago. When will I start to hit the panic button? When will I start to be worried? And I was like, look, we got a killer home stretch coming up, in a sense of a lot of games in a row. You have to win a certain portion of your home games to be successful. I know that we always protect home court. So for me, the telling sign for us was, how do we play at home? Figuring out on the road against top 5 teams on the West is just not the easiest thing to do. And we kind of figured it out so far. I was happy to see that we hit a streak until y'all stopped it. But we were streaking and feeling good and starting to play the right way. We got a couple injuries now, so I don't know what it's going to look like for the next couple weeks, but I'm comfortable. If that's a good word to use in sports, it's not, but I'm comfortable with where we're at because we're starting to get there. I can feel us getting there. With your Knicks, my guy, Kemba Walker, he's UConn, so I saw that you guys just benched Kemba, but like I said, it's that point in the season where you got to make something shake. You can't just keep losing and keep doing the same thing. It's been enough time from beginning to now. How are you feeling about your Knicks and also, our squads? We got a little something here, people, now. We can talk about it.
Yeah, you mentioned it. Tom Thibodeau this morning, it is Monday afternoon here. He announced that Kemba Walker would be out of the rotation as of now. Continuing, he said, quote, "It would be tough to play 3 small guards together." And then he continued that he has great respect for Walker and all he's accomplished, which that worried me a little because that was like he's done.
Yeah, that felt like a goodbye. That
felt concerning. I will say that. So, Alec Burks, who was in the starting lineup in the game against Atlanta and, just played great, which that is kind of a Tom Thibodeau trademark, is having a longtime bench guard just kind of like come through in these situations where they are handed the reins, whether it's DJ Augustin or Nate Robinson. You can add now Alec Burks to that. I'm feeling like there's some slivers of optimism here. Obviously, our bench unit has been, over the last several weeks, incredible. Has played at a different pace, at a different intensity level, has made quicker decisions. I think just as a function of being younger guys, maybe not making the best decisions all the time, but I think generally the Knicks need to make better decisions. No shots at Julius, but he's kind of like a plodding player in the sense that he gets the ball and then it takes him a second to be like, am I going to drive? I'm going to back this guy down. There's not that kind of like high pace of passes and decision making that there is with the younger guys in the bench unit. So moving Alec Burks, I think, is good. And similar to you, I feel like 20 games in, we're a quarter way through the season now. And at this point, you've given players time to show what they can do with a particular lineup in a particular role. And now it's time to make the hard decisions. And you've got that evidence under your belt. And so I think that while I was shocked that Tom Thibodeau made this move this quickly, this is not a thing. A real trademark of Tom Thibodeau over the course of his career has been he will hang on to something until it's proven, way past time, proven that it's time to move on, and then eventually he will move on. You can point to Elfrid Payton, starting late into the season last year as a prime example of that. But I think this was the right move. I think an eventual, maybe a move to the bench. Kemba is still scoring pretty well. It's just that he's not scoring consistently, and with the defensive liabilities, it's just really hard to start a game like that.
So do you think that this will change the course of like how y'all are playing? Do you think that little switch up, like what do you think that will do moving forward for you guys?
I think I hope so. I think that it should. Here's a player. It's hard to change a player's mentality, and Alec, I think, is better suited to play with more ball dominant, score first players like Julius and Evan. And I think I'm hopeful that this will work. And I think there was a little better continuity in the game against Atlanta. And I'm hoping that is a through line to the rest of the season. As for the Hawks, it's just like all about getting healthy. You guys have the one thing that every team in every sport wants, and that is a star. You have Eastern Conference Player of the Week, Trae Young, who is like, he started hitting these like near logo threes against us in the second half of the game, where it's just like, I don't even know what you can do. Like literally you can't do anything.
No.
Because if you push up on him, he's just going to drive by you
and shoot the float game
float game, which he is elite at. And if you don't close on him, as he showed 3-4 times against us, he will hit that shot. So it's just about the rest of the team getting healthy and putting together a run of games where they can just all be out there building that chemistry.
That's really been our Achilles heel, like just health. I mean, we just talked about it even against y'all. First of all, why'd y'all have to figure things out against us? All of a sudden people ain't playing, different people are in the starting lineup.
We needed it.
What I'm saying? It's like, y'all working things out now, changes being made off of our game. There's that. But then, I talked about it even in the game against you guys. We had 2 injuries. And now Bogey's out 2 weeks, and that's been the story of our season. Even with Trae Young and what happened to us last year, stepped on a rest foot, changed our whole season. Like it changed the whole series, and so health is huge for us. But I want to know, at what point does Trae Young, like I think Steph Curry right now is the MVP. But at what point does Trae Young's stats allow him to be in the conversation?
That's a great question. Like at what point? I'll put this forward. I think if your Hawks had come out a little stronger at the beginning of the season, I think he'd be in the conversation. I think you'd hear people say dark horse MVP candidate Trae Young. I think it's just a matter of winning. Because we've seen Trae.
Does winning matter for MVP? Like, see, this is the thing in sports, especially basketball, the great debate. Does your team need to be a winning team to be MVP?
I think yes. I think one of the brilliant, marketing
or
moves,
all-star, because there's been all-star debates about that as well.
All-star, I don't think it's important. I don't think it's as important. Obviously, there's an importance to winning, right? But I think with MVP, it's different. Like, listen, the NBA is very smart in that they've never defined what the MVP is. There's no criteria.
They never will, exactly.
Right? They never will because they love this debate. But one of the most consistent, categories for deciding the MVP over time has been winning. You just, the stats need to be out of this world, like Wilt Chamberlain type shit, if you're going to be a middling team.
Yeah, well, Russell Westbrook averaged a triple-double.
That's historic. It was a historic event.
It was a historic year, and he got MVP, although his team wasn't at the top of the rankings. But then it goes back to, so winning matters unless it's historic.
Right. I think that's
and look, I believe, like, I'm somebody that I want that. Like, anybody can be great on a bad team because you can shoot all the balls. You're going to get everybody's C game. And people don't take into account the Golden State Warriors and Steph Curry gets everyone's A game. Like, that matters because I can even remember with the Hawks last year, a lot of times teams might rest players when they played us. Like, it would be the game where they took a chance to see if they could win it, still a win on the road, rest a couple players here or there. Ain't nobody doing that against the Golden State Warriors unless they're like, we'll just let this game go. But typically, Steph Curry and the Golden State Warriors are getting every team's best shot, which is why I think that to be MVP, you got to be on a good team, because if you're not getting everybody's best shot, you're out there shooting 45 shots a game, averaging 100 points a game. Who cares? Like, your team, like that doesn't really matter, does it? So I like that the MVP should have a winning team, because then it puts the president on, you need to make sure your team is good and not individual. But I'm just always curious.
So the Atlanta's 11-10. Let's say they were 14-6. First of all, they'd be top of the Eastern Conference, or tied top of the Eastern Conference with the Brooklyn Nets. But I think people be talking about it, don't you? Okay. People be talking about Trae Young as MVP?
Do. I think winning matters. I was just curious even if we started to win, because I hear like rumblings of how people talk about even Trae when he has like great games, or when he does things that like everything is like, but can he continue it? Yes. Can Trae Young carry this team? Is he a superstar that can? And it's like, well, at what point do you prove you can? And I know that winning matters, so I do get that. But I think he's been pretty consistent. He had a consistent playoff run where every team we played against thought they had the remedy of how to stop Trae Young. Everybody had a Trae Young stopper. Let's trap him at half court. Get the ball out of his hands. Let's, after every pick and roll, blitz him. Like, everybody had an idea of how they could stop Trae Young. And everybody realized that Trae Young is still going to do Trae Young things. So I'm just curious, when do people believe it, or what's going on?
Well, let me ask you this, because I think this is an interesting question, and we talked about this in the pre-pro. Do you feel that Trae, I think Trae is shooting 51% from three over his last 4 or 5 games.
His numbers are wild.
That's wild video game shit. Do you think that, I'm not going to say he's disrespected, but if there's a level of not appreciating what he is doing on a night in and night out basis? Because it's not like,
definitely. I just think
it's like he does this on a regular basis.
It. Yeah, I don't know what it's like. Something about it. It's like, I think that the Hawks already have a stigma of losing, so people don't really fool with losers in general. Right. So you can't really be a superstar and lose all the time. That to me is an oxymoron. And so I think that because of that, it's like people don't necessarily know if they should trust it yet, if they should believe it. So that's why I asked, I wonder how many years does Trae Young need to be consistent for people to at least believe that he is who he says he is? Because last year it was like when he came on the scene, they were like, he's playing incredible. I can't believe some of this stuff. And we're like, I cover the Hawks, so I watch him do exactly what he did now last year, and again, winning matters, so I get that. But I'm curious, because I know there's a lot of superstars on non-winning teams that don't necessarily get the same type of skepticism that Trae Young gets. So I'm always curious of, when will people believe like Trae Young and his stats? Like, when does his stats speak for himself?
I will say that I think there is a stigma to being a small score first player. Like, people always want to believe, especially a shooter. I think people always want to believe, oh, they got hot. Oh, they got lucky. And especially when you're not tuned into a team on a regular basis and you just see these numbers pop off on ESPN or wherever on Takeline, you just think, oh, he's hot. He got hot again. He got hot from the outside, hit 6 of 8 or whatever in a game. And but when you watch him, you mentioned it, like so many Knicks fans last postseason were like,
angry.
We got to get physical with him. You got to punish him on the defensive end. You got to target him on defense. And it's like, if we could do that, you don't think we would do that? if Tom Thibodeau had the horses to do that, you don't think he's trying to do that? There's a reason that
yes, there's a reason that
this is happening.
Yes. And so that's my thing. It's like Trae Young over the course, and look, it was only one time, and I know the test of time is the biggest test in sports, but what happened last year in the playoffs was what happened last year in the second half of the season. When Coach Nate McMillan took over the team, Trae Young was consistent from that point on until he stepped on the ref's foot. Like, there was not a difference. It was like Trae Young is roasting people. People try to get physical, as you talked about. So I'm always just curious. Like, I'm just curious, when is Trae Young's stats going to speak for themselves? All right. So listen, we talked about shaking some things up, Jason, and the coaching.
It's time.
Woo! The coaching hot seat could be making its way, and I say could be because I know Laker Nation is crazy, so I'm saying could be making its way to Laker land. According to Mark Stein, there's some end quote buzz. Again, I'm just end quoting because I know Laker Nation. So the coaching circles around the league, they're saying there's some pressure mounting on head coach Frank Vogel. The Lakers are 11-11, make a wish. As we record this, they just came off of a win against the Pistons, but they lost in a 3 overtime game to the Kings, who just fired their coach, Luke Walton, again, shaking some things up at this time of the year. It's also the time of the year when coaches have to start making bigger adjustments before we near the All-Star break. So do we think if the Lakers continue these less than stellar performances, will Frank Vogel be in or is he out?
Wow. I mean,
that's a lot.
First of all, Frank Vogel has proven himself to be a good coach, right? Particularly on the defensive end. He won a championship with the Lakers last year. If Frank Vogel is fired, and it's very possible, just because of the Lakers and their timeline and the ambitions that they have, etc., it's not his fault. Like, this is not his fault. The Lakers being 11-11 right now, 8th in the West, that's not his fault, right? This roster was assembled by people above Frank Vogel's pay grade, but again, the LeBron James window is we got to get all the wins we can right now. Anthony Davis's window is we got to get all the wins we can get right now. We assembled this roster of, unbelievable marquee names in order to chase that title. And whenever a team struggles, who is the first person to take the hit? Always is always the coach. You always fire the coach first because you can't get rid of the players, at least not right now, and not in the way that would be a complete disruption of the team, right? That's hitting it's breaking the break glass in case of emergency button. And then you can't, you're not going to fire the GM right now. First on the firing line is always the coach. And so I could believe it. I could see Vogel getting fired, but I don't think that there's anybody around that thinks, oh man, Vogel could have done something. I'm unclear what he could have done other than, retain Alex Caruso for more money than they offered him and bring KCP back and, have a team that works together as a team, not as a collection of big names. That's not his fault. What do you think?
No, I think that, first of all, they do need those role players. Every team needs role players. Even if you look at USA basketball and how those teams are constructed, they don't always just get the biggest superstar names, all 12 players or their biggest superstars. Sometimes every USA pick, somebody goes, that guy made it? Every single time for the Olympics, there's that guy made it? And, even with JaVale McGee coming in, and I know it was because of COVID and different things like that.
JaVale playing great right now.
He's playing great right now, but a lot of people did that with JaVale, and it's no, you need certain things. You need pieces. You need to create a full team, and JaVale McGee provides something that the next player doesn't. And so when you start to think about assembling a team and putting it together, you need to build a team whose skill sets go well with each other. Yeah. All skill sets, you can't, just because you might have these highly skilled players, they might not mesh together. They might not play together well. There might be things in their games that hinder somebody else's game. And so you have to take all of that into account. Not saying the Lakers didn't, but to your point, they would have definitely benefited from a little Alex Caruso in there for sure, of somebody that's your grit player that doesn't need much of anything. They're there to make the other players look better. They're there to play the defense, be the grit, be the grime. You might need to mix in some of those, in sports, I don't know if it's even allowed to say, but you need some dogs on your team in a sense of that are just going to be spicy, get in there and just agitators, disruptors. And then you still need your stars because, like you said, every team needs a star. But when you have a Lakers team right now that is second in pace, fifth in points per game at 111, 7th in assists, 18th in defensive rating, 19th in three-point field goals made, 22nd in offensive rating, 23rd in rebounding percentage. those are a lot, like some of those things, that's
not.
grit. You need those type of players that are gonna like be the every night. Because if you got a LeBron that gets hurt, misses a certain amount of games, and he's your main facilitator, and you have struggles with Westbrook, you just need the players that are going to put their hard hat on every night and get to work. And so they're going to have to figure something out.
Vogel has made some recent tweaks. They put LeBron at center recently. Vogel said, quote, "We played the second unit that basically closed the game out in Indiana with LeBron and Melo at the 4 and 5. Call it a centerless lineup. There's a lot more space for Russ, which of course they need because Russ, is not a great shooter, needs to slash." I will say that here's the thing. Ever since LeBron started winning championships with Miami, then continuing at Cleveland, there's been a formula, and the formula has been you put shooters around LeBron.
Yep. A lot of them, right? You have a big guy who can protect the rim, play defense, pull down rebounds. And then you have somebody as like your emergency score creation player who can, with the ball in their hands, get to the rim ISO
when
player.
LeBron needs to take a couple of plays off. But it's that shooting and defense that you need. So again, they went away from that. I think you could say in deciding on Russell Westbrook over, say, Buddy Hield or somebody else. But that's not Frank Vogel's fault, but what he's been asked to do is kind of like assemble a new formula out of this. And it's just going to be, I think it's going to be very tough, especially because, again, we've seen what winning LeBron James teams look like and are constructed like. And that's not necessarily how this team is constructed. So it feels like if they do fire Frank, the next move is, we're going to be active at the trade deadline, right? I don't know what they could do, but
even to that point, I don't want to let like a coach all the way off the hook,
right?
Because there's rotations, there's minutes management. However, like for instance, certain lineups, what's your golden lineups? And I know you said that they've like been switching up the lineup and different things like that. So those things do matter for coaches. And Frank Vogel is 165 and 105 as a Lakers head coach. He's received a 1-year extension in August. That doesn't show much confidence. You see
a 1-year extension.
A 1-year extension. People want to extend you for 1 year. They're not doubling down on you,
Yeah.
So maybe there's a play it safe factor too, but
Yeah.
I think at this point, it's the shake up time. Like I said, this is that time of the season.
Yeah,
you
this
gotta
is that
shake
time.
something. You got to shake some things up. So if even if it's the Lakers shaking up and it's Frank Vogel or whatnot, but you can't play it safe at this point in the season because teams are surging. The Golden State Warriors don't want to lose any more games.
That's
like,
put a lot of pressure on them too, right?
Yes.
Because I don't think they thought the Warriors would be this good this soon. And now all of a sudden it's like, oh shit.
They are the Golden State Warriors that we knew before everyone. And look, they've been keeping tabs too. They've been listening to everything. Yeah, everything people have been saying about them.
They got a little folder with all the receipts.
The dynasty's over. It's not going to happen. Draymond Green's skill set is not for the NBA. It only works with the. They've been keeping receipts. So, like Steph giving the refs texts. I'm saying there's a lot going on out there. They are turned up. They're fired up. And yeah, that's in the West. And LA, I'm sure, thought that they was going to be right there in the thick of things with Golden State Warriors. I mean, all the top teams we talked about before the season, Brooklyn Nets, they're at the top. Golden State Warriors could be at the, they're the ones that are not necessarily where everyone thought they would be. So there is so much added pressure. And then if you're on a team with the man named LeBron James, half of their games are on ESPN or TNT. So it's like we get to see, to the same point of a lot of times people don't see what Trae Young does on a normal basis because we don't have those televised games. We watch every game of the Lakers. So we get to see them. They might have only lost 2 games in a row, but we watch those 2 games and everybody's like, oh my gosh, the Lakers, as opposed to if you don't watch everything live. So the Lakers are under the microscope. That never helps as well.
Yeah, Frank Vogel cuffing season 1-year extension.
I was like, that is not, they weren't doubling down on my guy. They were just like, here, let me see. Well, you got 1 more year, Frank.
Yeah. Great run. Thank you for bringing us another title. 1-year extension.
Gosh, it's brutal out here.
I know. Renee, over the weekend, Oklahoma football coach Lincoln Riley accepted the head coaching job at USC. There's a lot of buzz around the Trojan fan base, as Riley is known to be a very smart offensive mind and also a stellar recruiter. So we had to bring in my former colleague, USC alum, ESPN college football personality. You've seen him on your television screens wearing contact lenses. He's Paolo Uggetti. Paolo, how are you?
Man, I'm great. I feel like we're that Paul Rudd meme where it's like, look at us, like just connecting on a different platform, just
look at this.
It's been a minute.
I know. Paolo, if you had to guess before this move happened, who did you think would be the next football coach at USC?
Man, I thought they were going to have to pick up somebody who was not going to be a glitzy, a glam name, somebody who, is a good coach, but wasn't going to bring a lot of flash. You had a guy like Matt Campbell in Iowa State who seemed to be kind of the leader of the pack. They were linked to Dave Aranda and with Baylor for a little bit, but he quickly shut that down. So there were not a lot of big names out there to get. So the fact that they went and got Lincoln Riley, I mean, there was a huge shock value to that, but it's also like one of the best coaches you could have possibly gotten, which nobody saw coming.
So it's interesting because a lot of our listeners, they know about the money and high stakes when it comes to the business of pro sports, and that's football, basketball. But are there any financial details that you could kind of give us about what's going on here?
I don't have any details, but I will tell you what USC, I don't doubt that what USC had to give Lincoln Riley to move him from Oklahoma, where he's gone to the playoff a handful of times. He's developed 2 Heisman-winning quarterbacks. He has it pretty comfortable there. He could have stayed there his whole career if he wanted to, more likely. Yeah. So whatever that price tag looks like, it's gonna be a lot. It's gonna be up in one up, if not the highest paid coach in college football.
Being based here in LA, it's kind of like impossible to ignore, the vibe around the city after USC got smoked by Stanford. There was a level of like real anxiety and near panic, it felt like. And I'm not even a college football person, but it was impossible to ignore it. How influential was that? And, the influences of some of the, really important boosters for USC. How important was that in the decision to bring on Lincoln Riley?
Yeah. Well, I think it was, people have this misconception about USC fans in LA that because it's LA, it's casual and it's, we have so many other things to do.
Crazy.
People can get super riled up about it. And honestly, they've been riled up about Clay Helton for years, since I was there at the school. They've been wanting to get him out for so long that when it finally happened, it kind of was like, is this actually happening? But, you could argue that they pulled the trigger too late on that. But the fact that they were able to recover this way, I don't know if you could ask them, give them truth serum and ask them, did you know you were going to get Lincoln Riley when you fired Clay Helton? But the fact that they did is crazy. And it's really, going from, no offense to Clay Helton, he was the right guy for the program when they needed to save face. But now they're like actually trying to revive the program, be good on the field, and just bring back that USC brand that, Reggie Bush and Pete Carroll kind of established. So there had to have been a huge push, not only financially, but also just, it seems like from the reports out there that they, pitched Lincoln Riley over Zoom, just after the loss the other night. And we're just like, here's everything we can give you. And that's how you got to do it. That's how you got, I would have liked to know, like, maybe we'll get an answer to this, but what would have happened if they would have won, they would have beat Oklahoma State? Like, does that change the timeline? Does that mean he's not coming? There's so many ripple effects to that loss.
Well, you talked about they wanted to get back to the winning and build the program. So just to put things into context, in 5 seasons with Oklahoma, Riley had a 55-10 record, won 4 Big 12 titles, had 3 football playoff appearances, success to say the least. So my question is, what is the Oklahoma fan base feeling right now? Like, they couldn't have seen that coming, right?
Man, they're struggling. They're tweeting through it. They're really
tweeting through it.
They're tweeting through it. There's no other way to put it. There's people, doing the math on how many more taxes Lincoln Riley's going to have to pay just by living in California.
They big mad. Ooh.
Yeah, they have.
There's people talking about how he's scared of going to the SEC because Oklahoma is eventually going to move to the SEC. So there's a lot of tough reaction. I mean, and really the way that it all went down, I think contributes to that, which like coaches do this all the time, right? But the fact that he did it just after the loss, and they caught them in the air. No, they didn't catch them in the airport, but they were traveling overnight or this morning from the Oklahoma City airport. And it was him and like 4 of his assistant coaches just getting on a private plane to come to LA. So the fact that it was just done, the way it was done, it's almost like a TV show of sorts, but it definitely pouring salt on the wind for Oklahoma fans.
We don't have that truth serum, but I mean, do you think the SEC move had anything to do with it?
You have to imagine that it was at least a factor in some capacity, just because there's a lot of uncertainty there financially, from a competitive standpoint. Like that's a whole other world. Like it is not easy being a SEC head coach. And, honestly, like a lot of people are like, he doesn't want the SEC smoke, but like, if you were him, why would you? When you you can get, when you can get to the college football playoff from the Pac-12 every year, you can rebuild the program. And then if you end up winning a title with USC, you're set, So there's a lot of advantages to the move. And frankly, timing wise, it made a lot of sense for him now in retrospect.
Well, we were actually talking about this in the pre-pro meeting about there seems to be a lot of movement with college football coaches. And so even if they're at the top program, it doesn't matter. We're seeing a lot of movement as opposed to college basketball where you don't see that carousel at the top teams. Why do you think that is?
There's a crazy, I think this year has been crazier than past years, but there's just like a general impatience. And you would think that maybe it's because there's a little more parity this year that there are teams that talk themselves into thinking like, why can't we be Oklahoma State and be on the fringe of the playoff? What's stopping us, right? There's that. There's just the money has gotten so absurd that buyouts are no longer hurdles. Like, boosters will recoup the money and figure out a way to change coaches. It's wild. I mean, it really comes down to just people being like, there's an impatience, I think, across the sport to win. And it's crazy because the limited playoff field, I think, has caused that in some way, because now it's very clear which 4 teams are the teams that are doing well at the end of the year. And I wonder, because there's a lot of talk of the field expanding to 12 eventually, and I wonder if that's going to change that. For one, it's going to make for a lot fewer debates, which frankly, I wish that they stuck. I mean, I guess you're always going to debate like 13th team versus the 12th team, but I think the debate is part of the fun of having a limited field. So I'm curious to see how the expanded field factors into how, teams look at coaches.
He's a college writer for ESPN, Paolo Uggetti. Thanks for joining us on Takeline.
Thank you guys for having me.